Ghana has betrayed Africa. Ghana has betrayed Africa, folks. I brought you a story yesterday which was praising John Mahama, the president of Ghana, for going to the United Nations to put forward a UN resolution about slavery, which was passed by 123 nations, 3 abstentions, 57 abstentions, 3 no's. And I talked to you about the significance of that for laying a foundation for slavery, because they were categorized as the greatest crime against humanity in history. Well, on the same day, Ghana did something that is absolutely mind-boggling. Ghana becomes the first African nation to join EU Security Defense Partnership. Agreement expands cooperation on counterterrorism, cybersecurity, regional stability as threats grow in West Africa.
All right. Welcome to Pan-African Perspectives, your weekly live stream where we cover all things Africa related and Pan-Africanism. Today we are talking about whether or not Ghana betrayed Africa's historic UN resolution. Who you just heard from is the Merc, viral content creator who speaks a lot about things happening on the continent. He has a very strong opinion on this, and I want to hear from you all. So first, we're going to talk about the historic UN resolution on the transatlantic slave trade. And then we're also going to talk about the security deal that Ghana did with the European Union. Why so many people have been flooding my inbox, sending me WhatsApp messages, calling me, and asking me what I thought about this and why they feel like this is such a bad thing that Ghana has done. I think there is nuance to everything, but we're going to talk about it. So let's first get into this historic UN resolution. And I think it's important for you guys to see what the resolution said and is. So let's talk about it a little bit just so you guys are aware of what we're talking about. So the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution describing the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. This was proposed by Ghana. It was supported by a large majority of countries, while others, like the United States, Israel, Argentina, voted against it, and many European countries chose to abstain. Although the resolution is not largely binding, it goes beyond symbolic recognition. It calls on countries historically involved in the slave trade to engage in forms of restorative justice, such as acknowledging responsibility, addressing long-term consequences, and considering measures like returning cultural artifacts or supporting affected communities. Also, potential other types of reparations as well. Now, supporters argue that clearly defining the slave trade in these terms is essential to recognizing its scale, brutality, and lasting impact, including ongoing inequalities and discrimination. Now, countries that opposed or abstained raised several concerns. The United States, of course, argued that the resolution could imply a legal right to reparations for actions that were not, quote unquote, illegal under international law at the time. And they also objected to ranking one historical atrocity above others. Now, European countries and specifically and the United Kingdom expressed similar reservations, warning that using terms like gravest crime against humanity could create a hierarchy among crimes against humanity, and that parts of the text raise legal and quote unquote historical interpretation issues, including concerns about retroactively applying modern legal standards. Overall, the vote reflects an ongoing global debate: how to define and remember one of history's most devastating systems, and what responsibilities present-day society should have on addressing this legacy. Man, I do want to hear from my subscribers. Those of you who are watching, please talk about this. I want to hear from you. I want to put your thoughts and feelings on the screen. What you see on screen right now are three different categories. You have in green with the plus signs those in favor of calling this the gravest crime against humanity, 123 countries. Those against calling it the gravest crime against humanity is 3 countries. And those who abstained, abstention, 52 countries. Now, what do each of these 3 mean? I'm going to review them for you all so you're aware. I'm going to keep this up on the screen so you can find countries that you're familiar with, and you tell me what are some of the patterns that you see. Let us know in the comments for sure. We want to hear from you guys in the comments because this one is wild. This is a wild one. So first of all, voted against means a no vote. That means it signals a complete rejection of the resolution's text, usually due to quote unquote fundamental legal or ideological disagreements, rather than a denial of the historical tragedy itself. So for example, the United States voted against. They did a no vote. Sorry, they voted no. The U.S. argued that the resolution attempted to apply international law retroactively, claiming that the slave trade was not illegal at the time under international law. They also objected to the specific call for reparations and the creation of a hierarchy, what they call a hierarchy of atrocities, by labeling one crime, quote unquote, the gravest. Israel and Argentina also aligned with the U.S. in opposition, reflecting broad geopolitical alliances and shared concerns over legal precedents. The neutral vote or abstention allows a country to avoid voting no on a sensitive human rights issue while refusing to support the specific legal obligations in the text. So, for example, the European Union and the United Kingdom, which was formerly part of the European Union, but because of Brexit, they now are separate from the European Union. These nations faced what they consider a dilemma. They said they could not vote no without appearing to minimize the horrors of slavery. However, they refused to vote yes because the resolution supports a legal framework for reparations. By abstaining, they acknowledged the moral tragedy, but rejected the claim that modern states are legally liable to pay for historical wrongdoings. Who voted yes, you might wonder, as you're scrolling through and looking at this document here on your screen that shows who voted yes, abstained, and who voted no. China and Russia voted in favor to align with the global South and African nations, positioning themselves as champions of anti-colonialism and critics of Western historical legacies. The entire African group, well, almost all, led the push for the resolution to formalize the legal argument that slavery's legacy, economic underdevelopment, and racism requires concrete financial and structural remedies today. And there are a couple who didn't vote. Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador didn't vote at all. What are your thoughts? Before I give my thoughts, let me go to some of the comments that I see here. There were some comments that are showing up here. If you guys are on Instagram, Asmadu says the U.S. is full of something and nobody should listen to what it says. That's what Asmadu says on Instagram. Asmadu also says it isn't wild at all. They're just saying they don't agree with any law, period. Okay, that's Asmadu's thoughts. This model has lots of thoughts here. Let me get onto some of the other folks' thoughts. Lion Champion says the agreement will allow the EU and NATO to monitor AES and plan attacks. We'll get to that in a second. There's some thoughts here about what they think that Ghana did. We'll get to that in a second. I'll put you guys' thoughts up on the screen when we get to the point about the security deal that Ghana has done with the EU. Let's focus first on this resolution. So now, this resolution, let me walk you through a couple of different things that I haven't heard discussed in detail about this resolution and how we got here. So, one, there are some in the States, and you know, those who are in some of the divided groups who feel that African nations should not be the ones asking for reparations because there was some human trading happening at portions and times during the transatlantic slave trade. And in some cases, people who are on the continent of Africa were involved in that process. There's a lot of context required to have that discussion, but that is a reason why some people feel that this should not have been brought forth by an African nation. You guys can determine if you agree or disagree with that. Here's what I do know. When it comes to something like this, right? If you want to get reparations paid, the United States was not the first or the only member of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, the UK was one of the first countries to actually abolish it. The most recent version of the transatlantic slave trade, let's put it that way, because there's other slave trades that have been happening since and continue to happen. So by going to the United Nations, it includes all countries involved, not just one. Why does that matter? Because many times the conversation about reparations happens in the United States in a silo, and it's talked about on a state-by-state basis. Sometimes it's spoken about by some representatives. Sometimes it's spoken about candidates for presidency. However, the only way that you can get a systemic process to even get to reparations is going to have to be from a larger scale, and it has to be recognized to even get to that point. So how did this process go? The president of Ghana, John Mahama, went to the African Union first to get the African Union to agree and to sign off on this as the gravest crime against humanity. The African Union agreed. He then went to the United Nations and did the same. Now, everybody has their beliefs and thoughts about African Union, the United Nations, but at the end of the day, these are large governing bodies that have large groups of what we now call countries who make decisions across all of these groups. So that was the process that had to happen before we can even get to the reparations discussion. Because, of course, you need to acknowledge it, put language behind it before you can have a truth and reconciliation that comes after it. I disagree with the folks that think that Africa should not be part of this process. Why do I disagree with that? Because although some Africans did take part in this, it did largely happen to those who even took part in it themselves, right? This was not a case where Europeans showed up, they sat on boats, and Africans were just shuttling other Africans onto those boats. That is not how it happened. In some cases, there was some trade because at the time, you know, in Africa, they did not have jails the way we do in modern day times today. So many times you had prisoners of war, you had sometimes people who had committed crimes, who had to work off their debt to society through forced labor, right? It was something that the world had done over time. But in this instance, the difference between those folks and what was done here is that it entirely was based on forced labor and erasure of entire cultures and groups and moving them and separating them from their homeland. So in my opinion, you guys can tell me what you guys think. I think that it doesn't matter who brings it forth, as long as it's brought forth and there are actual reparations that follow. Now, we will see if reparations come. Now, there are some people who say, I don't believe that I should have my handout from someone else to get something. And that's totally fine. I get it. You don't have to be in agreement with it. But I do think for other major crimes against humanity, reparations have been received and paid. We're talking about in the United States, and we're talking about globally. You guys can look up who has gotten reparations, but the one group who has yet to get reparations for all the crimes against this group is people of African descent, regardless of how they have been impacted by the transatlantic slave trade. One last thing I'll mention on this, which I think is a very important part of this discussion, is the idea that because it is difficult, it cannot happen. And I think for so long, so many people said, it's never going to happen. Why are you even talking about this? Why are you even doing it? And if you take that viewpoint, then it never will happen. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you might as well attempt it. So in my opinion, I do think it was the right thing to do to potentially get the process started. Now, there are some people who believe this was a distraction. And we'll get to why people believe that in a moment. But I do want to give you a quick view of, again, who voted for, who voted against, who abstained, and the no votes. So now you have on your screen these 4 categories. 123 countries voted in favor or voted for this resolution. Again, China, Russia, the Africa group, which includes a number of different people, India, Brazil, and most of the global south. You'll notice that BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are all part of BRICS. They all voted with this. And then the BRICS plus 6. So there are other countries. I think most of the other 6 countries also voted in favor. Who voted against? As you can see here, the United States, Israel, and Argentina. Do with that information as you will. I'm going to leave that right there. Abstained, 52 countries, including the European Union, all 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, and Italy, United Kingdom, outside of the European Union now, Canada also abstained. Japan, interestingly enough, abstained. And Australia abstained. And then there was 15 or so no votes. Voting rights are suspended due to unpaid dues. So Venezuela could not vote. Most people think that they probably would have voted in favor. Bolivia and Ecuador also did not vote. This is an interesting conversation to be had. And we wanted to bring it to you because it has been a very, very eventful 72 hours. I have been traveling. I just got back to where I am right now, New York City, last night, less than 24 hours ago. And I wanted to make sure I brought this to you guys. So, some things, some notes here. Some people are mentioning Benin didn't vote. You know, the AU, they're saying, and their connections to EU. I'll leave that there. Jada saying, but the ones who are saying Africa shouldn't be involved are, well, okay, so there's a question about FBAs, Foundation of Black Americans, right? Did they arrive in Africa before the transatlantic slave trade? And so that is a good point. The point that, in, you know, their FBAs there are different people who have different ways to describe FBAs. I'd love to have someone on who considers himself in the FBA camp to describe how they feel about this and if in fact they would qualify. Because because the question is also, how do you qualify for this? Does someone like me qualify? Do I qualify for reparations in both instances or in no instances? For example, on my mother's side, I am from a tribe that is potentially returnees from the transatlantic slave trade, possibly. On another side, I am part of an indigenous African group on that side. And so I think that there are questions about whether or not I would be included in both types or not at all, right? And there are questions about this, and we'd have to determine, or someone would have to determine, who gets paid, who does the paying, how it would be paid, how long it would take, and when it would start, right? All of those things would have to be determined. And there's a lot there, but at the very least, the conversation has started. But I wanted this to live on the screen while I talk through all of that, so you guys can see who was in favor, who was against, and who abstained. And again, if you want to see the full list in its entirety, this is what the voting looked like at the UN General Assembly just the other day. You see it all here. And I think this right here speaks for itself. You guys tell me how you feel about this. So now the reason why I played the video from the Merc earlier, and I should mention the Merc is someone who has built who's beginning to build a huge following, and I think he has been a voice in the community who has been speaking a lot about what's happening on the continent, and he does not mince words. He speaks his opinion, and the reason why I'm playing his videos instead of news outlets videos is because he reflects what I've heard from so many people on the ground in different countries. I've heard people speaking about this in Ghana. I have been hearing people speak about this in other countries on the continent of Africa. I've heard people speak about this in the United States. And I thought that viewpoint is one that it deserves to be heard by all of you. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Now, I will say this. We're talking about FBA in the comments. I see that here. Any disparaging remarks about individuals, whether I agree with them or not, I generally won't put them on the screen. So if you guys want to have that conversation in the comments, you can. And if you're interested in seeing those comments, just go over to the YouTube live stream and check those out. But I just can't put those on stage because I don't want to seem like I'm endorsing those particular viewpoints. And also definitely not to specific presidents or people of that nature. So I won't do that as well, but you guys can feel free, freedom of speech. You have the ability to do so. I cannot be seen as endorsing that because all it takes is one screenshot and, I have problems on my hands. ETSARWE, sorry, I don't know how you would pronounce that, says, thank you so much for bringing more information about our Africa and other countries. I need God to be with our worlds and unit. Grace, Africa lives matters all over the world. Amen, amen. Okay. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I first heard about the resolution. I saw some videos, right? And I wasn't sure who was going to vote in favor, who was going to vote against, who was going to abstain. Had lots of questions, had lots of thoughts. Did not know who was going to do what. And I was kind of watching along to say, okay, who do we think is going to take part in this? And so I was not shocked. I actually was not shocked at all, considering where the United States stands today. And it probably didn't matter who was president of the United States. I think the United States may have either abstained or said no. I think maybe on another administration, the United States might have abstained. Under this administration, it's an outright no. Now, there's a lot of questions and conversations around Do you put today's standards on yesterday's practices? We have these conversations about people's behaviors 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You know better, you do better. We're in a different place now. Do we hold them accountable for things they did at that time when it wasn't considered generally bad to do? Considering like things that people say, for example, phrases that people use to describe groups of people, right? There were things were commonplace in 1999, in 2002, when I graduated high school, that are not commonplace today. Many people believe that you don't penalize people who said some of those things then the way you would now with today's information, especially if they don't espouse those same beliefs. I think when it comes to something like this, if there were people who didn't participate, although that group of people might be a small group of people, that's enough to say that there were enough people to know that this was wrong. So, WealthStack says this conversation needs to be had. My problem is, as a Black American, is that we are letting the FBA group represent Black Americans because they are the loudest voices, and that messes us up. Here's what I'll say. I think, and I'm just reading, that was just me reading WealthStack's comment. Here's what I think. I think that if you guys believe that one subset should not speak for everyone, as I believe that, then it makes sense to amplify other subsets and other voices, right? So that this is what's required in order to make sure that more voices are heard. You know, in the same way, we had this conversation about the fact that there are non-Africans, people who aren't of African descent, getting citizenship in Africa. That ship has already sailed. That's already happening. So you can't stop that. But what you can do is make sure other people counterbalance that, right? There should be other people who are of African descent getting those kinds of citizenship and working to make sure that, you know, we are represented in those groups and in those rooms and in those places where that's happening. Slavery is still legal in the U.S. Constitution as the 13th Amendment. That is true. If you read it, it does say except for incarceration. Very good point. There's a great documentary called The 13th that Ava DuVernay did. She directed the documentary, and it talks about incarceration in the United States and how slavery is still legal for incarcerated individuals. Good point. Descendants of the Middle Passage, trafficked Africans in the USA, have allegedly sought reparations in the USA since 1783, but not on the level of the UN. There's a lack of respect for continental and diaspora Africans. I agree. I agree to both of those things. And here's the other thing I'll mention. It does require a head of state, right? A head of state has to take it to these other groups. It requires, in America, it requires elected officials to bring this to a vote and to turn it into law. Just like it requires a head of state to go to the United Nations to make this a designation. Now, on the point of the gravest crime against humanity, numbers, because this isn't about feelings, it's about numbers, right? So there have been different types of slave trades. There have been different types of genocides in world history. They have reached the millions, and all of them are tragic. And there should never be a tragedy Olympics for anyone to try to say, my tragedy was worse than yours. However, if we are just speaking about the numbers, estimates, these are estimates. I've heard and seen these estimates in many different places. Up to and around anywhere as many as 60 million Africans were trafficked. Now, these are numbers that we are getting from on the continent, some other places from time to time, but these are the numbers that I have seen. Now, I've seen other numbers that are much lower than that. But from what I have seen and what I have read, up to 60 million people were trafficked during the transatlantic slave trade. Now, how many made it across the oceans? They say about 12 million. So 48 million potentially experienced loss of life, and the 12 million were made to build other countries. When we're looking at other groups who received reparative justice, their numbers are even less than the 12 million number I just described. Let's not even think about what King Leopold did in Africa and how many Africans' lives were impacted by what King Leopold did, which is a whole separate conversation. But let's just speak to and stick to the transatlantic slave trade. Now, because of that, it warrants the designation of the gravest. Now, if I can say that there is a mistake that might have been made, is that it gave people the opportunity to abstain by disagreeing with the language gravest crime against humanity, or even saying no. So if I was to give a point of correction, consideration, that would be it. Now, some points that are being made here that I think are really important. This makes sense. Lion Champion 587 says slavery is still legal. Oh, I said that already. So Seeking God Films says, yes, no statute of limitations on unaliving people and taking people against their will. I can't say these words on YouTube. It's a thing. That's why you hear me say unalive and taking people against their will. It's just a thing that YouTube does. So just keep that, just so you guys are aware. I can read. I just can't say those words. So yes, there's no statute of limitations on those things. So should there be a statute of limitations on this? Now, the statute of limitations is different because that implies that it was already illegal, and the person who has gotten in trouble or who has been prosecuted for that illegality, it happened much later on beyond what normally would be a statute of limitations for certain types of crimes. What the United States is saying is that it was not a crime at the time that it was done. So the statute of limitations argument does not work for what the United States seems to think is their reason for not actually agreeing to that language. So yes, these are all things that are important. Let me see some more comments here. Okay, so it's a long name and I can't read it all together, but it says it looks like the U.S., I think is what they're trying to say, used the very opportunity to, one, disparage the whole thing, the whole shebang was, and engage the Ghana EU deal. That's what they're feeling like. Okay, yes, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Okay, so another comment says the absurdity is that argument insulting people's intelligence. If we are saying the absurdity of the argument that I guess if you're thinking of the United States' argument. This person is saying you can stop citizenship for non-Africans through protesting. Ghana cannot be the first with such policies, yet Nigerians and other West Africans close by cannot be granted citizenship. So Seeking God Film says the U.S. did not consider us humans, rather 3/5 humans. So they didn't think we were humans. So not the gravest crime against humanity. All points taken. Okay, so now conversations were happening, and it was a flurry of discussions. Should Africans have been the ones to produce this resolution? Who agreed with the resolution? Who didn't? How upset are we that certain countries did or did not vote, abstained, etc. Right? These conversations were all happening. And then reporting came out about the deal between Ghana and the EU, the defense agreement. And I exhale like that because of the barrage of messages I got immediately following the release of this story. So, reported by the BBC and others, the agreement is as follows. On March, oh, you know what? Actually, let's get back into the Merck's video because I did not give him time to continue to finish what he was saying.
Just staggering, guys. The same day that they voted on slavery and all of the EU abstained, basically voted against. This is what Ghana has now done. We've been sold out, guys. We've been sold out completely. It's over with. We're finished. So as you can see, guys, Ghana became the first nation to join the EU Security Defense Partnership. They've invited the European Union to do security in Africa from Ghana as a base, you know. The European Union abstained on the vote. All of the European Union stood against categorizing slavery as the greatest crime against humanity. And on the same day, you signed this deal?
Wow. So that is the Merck's viewpoint there. He did not mince words, as I said before. Some things that people are saying, you know, there are layers. And there are layers. Read everything that they're saying that I cannot read out loud, but I think it's important to call out all these things, right? Very true. Very true. And then Afuya says, it amazes me that we continue to try to intellectualize barbarism. You know. Okay. So this person agrees with the Merck. All right. So now let's get into this deal, because this one is one that I think shocked a lot of people. I mean, look, I can tell you I had some conversations this weekend with some very, very angry people about this deal. So, you know, maybe I can put up a quick news article for you guys to review. So you guys can see directly, and then I'll read through the details of the deal. So let me go ahead and share, and then there's some other thoughts that people have. I think it's an interesting one, so more than happy to put some of those up on the stage too. And I think I'll do that right after. You know what? There's a couple of things that people are saying, so I do want to address it. So let's do this. So WBG Sports WBG Sports and Fitness says, this is why they don't respect us. You cannot stand for one thing today and switch the next day. Wellstack says, brother, I think you are overlooking the fact that the whole vote seemed to have been a division tactic to push EU deal through. Would love to be wrong. Oh, diversion tactic. Okay. Yeah, that is something that the Merck states in his video. He feels that way too. Afuya saying, did you know that in December 2013, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 68-237, by which it proclaimed 2015 to 2024 to be the International Decade of People of African Descent? Not aware of that. Don't know what the planned outcome was supposed to be of that. But I'd be interested to see what was the expected outcome, because that is interesting that they declared that. I wonder what came of that. That's what Lions Champion has to say. Okay, so let me put on screen now this story and give you guys an opportunity to review it, and then we will and then I'll give you my thoughts and go into detail. So this is the press release of the defense partnership, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so it's all here. I'm going to read through kind of the details. So on the 24th of March 2026, Ghana became the first African nation to sign a formal security and defense partnership with the European Union. This agreement was signed by Ghana's vice president and the EU high representative, what they claim to bolster Ghana's capacity to counter what they call regional instability and evolving security threats. So the key objectives of the partnership, as they see it, is the agreement establishes a structured framework for long-term cooperation in several key areas. 1, counterterrorism. What they say is strengthening intelligence sharing and operational tactics to prevent what they call Islamist militancy from spilling over from what they say is the Sahel region into northern Ghana. Also, maritime security. They're also saying that this is enhancing safety in the Gulf of Guinea to do what they call protecting trade and to what they call combat piracy. Cybersecurity and hybrid threats. They say this is meant to protect critical digital infrastructure and what they say countering foreign information manipulation. Another key objective is broader management. They say this is to help improve surveillance, to track movement of what they call armed groups, and prevent transnational organized crime, according to them. Also, and there's a couple of things here. The full text is here. I'll put a link in the description because I didn't add it previously. Excuse me. I didn't add it previously, but I will add a link. I just clicked on that link, so let me share this tab. It is a extensive document. It's 10 pages that goes through all the points that I'm going to speak to from a high level. But this is what the document looks like here on your screen. So, beyond the key objectives of the partnership, there's also military equipment and financial support. So as part of the signing, the EU formalized the handover of military equipment funded under a $54 million package from the European Peace Facility. The total EU security support to Ghana has now surpassed 100 million euros. The equipment delivered includes surveillance drones and anti-drone guns, explosive ordnance disposal, vehicles and equipment, electric warfare systems and advanced communication tools, motorcycles for rapid border response, for what they call rapid border response. So this pact places Ghana in a select group of EU security partners that include United Kingdom, because obviously they were part of the EU previously. Now with Brexit, they're no longer in it. Canada, Japan, and Norway. Importantly, officials clarified that the agreement does not include the deployment of European troops or the establishment of a permanent EU military base in Ghana and on Ghana's soil. Instead, it focuses on what they call building the institutional operational autonomy of the Ghana Armed Forces to maintain what they call regional stability. Now, that was an argument I heard from people who feel like this was a good idea. I've heard them say, well, there's no boots on the ground, so this is different. You guys tell me what you think. Now, there are a lot of comments. I want to get to some of these. This is a thought. They think that it's allowing EU and NATO to recolonize Africa. This is an argument that has been stated before. I've heard this. This is a good point, Jada is saying. Have you heard that they're saying this? I hear this. Yes, I've heard this. I've also heard that it was ISIS and other groups coming through the southern U.S. border. This is something that people in the political sphere have been saying. Yes, I've heard that. She seems to think that they may say so about West Africa. Possibly. I will not speculate on anything anybody will potentially do. That is not my role to speculate. Seeking God Film says they're not protecting anything but their interests and hold on Africa. What else? Afuya says this. They're saying this. Wealth Stack says this. US and EU is moving chess pieces, closing in on the Sahel region. And mentions the Nigeria. You guys can read what's on the screen there. I won't read that. The rest of that out loud. Okay, Seeking God says they're not protecting anything but their interests in the hold on Africa. All European nations, some things there. Wellstack says troops are not needed on the ground. There's some other speculative statements being said that I will not put on screen. This is a good question. And I think there's a question that we should ask ourselves. Where will the data be stored? Whoever controls the storage room controls the food stored. That's a good point. Are the servers, private servers, only accessible by Ghanaians? I don't know. It does say security sharing. So that is a good question. And that would be a question for the folks who signed the agreement. That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that question, but that's a good question. So let's play some more from the Merc. He had a lot to say, and I just want to, play more from this because I've heard more of these particular statements. So we're going to play it. We're going to play this and then have some more commentary.
Sorry, guys. I just decided to. This is from. I started to turn on my camera. This is my phone because I literally just found this out this morning. You do a deal with them, then you go to Libya. People are getting on alert. I told you about what's happening with Gaddafi. You've got the flintlock thing going on in Libya, so you're going to take over Libya. You then bomb Nigeria along the borders of Niger, so you're going to take over that corner of Niger. Can't you see what is happening? They're trying to box in the Sahel states. From every angle, they're going country to country around Africa, all the countries that surround the Sahel states, and compromising them, doing deals with these presidents, Nigeria, Ghana, Libya. I don't even know what's left. Do you know that the only countries that are not categorically selling these guys outside is places like Algeria? I mean, we can talk about North Africa, but the only country that is bordered with Niger now and the Sahel countries that has not outwardly come out and said that we are now working with France or the EU to play guys out is Algeria. And listen, who knows what's really going on in Algeria?
Whew. So, your thoughts on what was said there? A few people agree. So, Yeshua says, do not really sound as an apologist for EU non-Africans getting citizenship. The Stockholm Syndrome affecting Ghana seemingly is your consistent rhetoric. You and Charmaine, unfortunately. Do you guys understand what is being said here? I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to say. Can you rephrase that so I understand what you are trying to say here. Okay, so exactly, look at the map. Jade is saying he knows that Algeria signed a security deal months ago. So did Morocco. The Sahel is officially boxed in. Here's some thoughts that people have on Algeria. Wealth Stack says, yes, exactly. Okay, that's what they're saying. And this is what they're saying. They're not surprised at all. So I thought that was an interesting viewpoint from the Merc there. And in the interest of my travel, because you'll find in this video, and you guys should watch this full video. It's gotten some pretty good traction over the last couple of days because I think a lot of people agree with the sentiments that he's saying. He himself does not say what country he is in when he records this video. Because when you have very strong viewpoints and you speak your mind in this way, you know, you're gonna have to be careful, of course, how you communicate where you are in the world when you do that. So, you know, that's why I'm very careful with what I communicate. I want to make sure that these conversations are had and that I give all the information that I can. But I do it from my perspective of sharing information and speaking to what I feel like we can control and what I would like to try to control on our own. I leave it to others to speak specifically to these things. Yes, the Merc is Nigerian. Yes, he is of Nigerian descent. Doesn't mean he's in Nigeria right now. But yes. Jada saying, I haven't heard of Guinea making any deals. Am I wrong? I don't think you're wrong about that. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how many deals Guinea's making with anyone at the moment. I don't even think they've made too many deals with the Sahel. And the reason why Guinea is a part of this discussion is because they also had a coup and they are under military leadership. And they're also in West Africa. But the AES is specifically Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and Guinea is not a part of that. And so some people have asked from time to time, why is that? And so I don't know if there has been, but yeah. So Lion says he has been around for a long while. Our advertisers kicked him off social media for a while. There you go. Here's a thought that somebody had. John says. So that's what John thinks. Okay. So I'm glad to hear from you guys and get you guys' thoughts, because I think your thoughts, you guys, your thoughts. I think it was important to have this conversation, to continue to have this conversation. Here's what I will say. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up for the newsletter and sign up for our soon to come subscription service. On the subscription service, I will be more specific on my thoughts and feelings on things because it's behind a paywall and it is not in the public sphere. So it may not have to, decisions on what gets shown and what doesn't get shown does not happen on the public sphere, because I do have to be careful, because I do want these messages and these conversations to happen on a broader scale. And so I want to be careful not to limit the reach. So Yashra says, we cannot afford to placate their rhetoric, believe not their actions. It's just a matter of giving information. Do understand the Merc was really pissed off at the end of that video. Yes, he was. Wealth Stack says, where is the sign up? That's a good point, because it was supposed to be in my YouTube description, but because of the day that I was having, because man, it has been a long day, I did not have that ready for you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a link and I will make sure that you guys have it. Let's see. Give me 1 second. March 29th. Sorry, I just don't see the websites. Okay, so while I look for that, let me see. Afuya says, "Be calm and take your domination." Okay. Yeah, understandable, bro. No rush. But yeah, I mean, look, I think that there are those who are going to be more vocal about how they what they believe. And there are others who won't be in a public sphere. I'm one of those people who won't be in a public sphere for now. The time will come. Trust me, the time will come, but not right now. There are many reasons for that, and that's a conversation for our own private conversations, but not for the public. So for whatever reason, I think one of my sites have been updated. Okay, there we go. It's been fixed. All right. So I am going to, it is a long link. It is a long link. So here we go. So here's a question Lion's asking. Lion's asking, why aren't you angry? This is serious times. How I feel about anything doesn't necessarily have to come out in a conversation 3 days after I find something out. Keep in mind, I've been aware of this for 3 days. I'm coming to you guys live to share the story. And as you might have noticed, I generally take a measured approach when I communicate publicly. How I feel about things doesn't necessarily have to come out in how I communicate them to the general public. So the reason why I take a measured approach is because I have decided that I am going to allow other people who want to take a more an approach that has more emotion involved. I'll allow other people to do that. That is just not how I am choosing to have my brand be public. Now, if you dislike that, you can always go somewhere else. You're not required to be here to watch the live streams. I just choose to do it the way I do it. But I do understand that some people take issue with me speaking just the facts and not showing anger. But there was already a video that did that. I didn't need to do that. We've already seen a video today, and you'll get a chance to watch it. And there are plenty of people online who are doing that. That is just not my style. If you've ever known me, and many of you are only being introduced to me this way, I've never been a person who has been, I don't get too high on the highs and I don't get too low on the lows. I work on what I can, and I work on what I can control. And so I know that I can control my emotions, and so I choose to. Now, Wellstaff says, is there a path forward where neo-colonialism doesn't work out on the continent? Strategically, it's looking rough. That's a good question, and that's a tough one to answer. We are still dealing with quite a significant, somebody said Stockholm Syndrome. There are so many things that there are so many things that have led to where we are today. And many of those things we don't have time to go over on this live stream, but we've talked about it on many occasions. And look, they keep many African nations where they are. I think the best thing that we can do is do what we can to support those who are operating outside of this. And, you know, as we can see, there are things challenging those people in the AES. these conversations today. I think many people would agree that this could potentially challenge the AES. And so we support in many ways, in whatever ways that we can. Look, I know that there are powers greater than us, even in this collective on this live stream. I think the most important thing is that we educate ourselves first. And then those of us who are involved in these kinds of conversations are people who have the ability to make change, or who can share this information with people who have the ability to make change. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be the next 5 years, 10 years, it may be 50 years from now. But the place that I feel like I play in this is to share these conversations and to communicate this to the larger group. That's how I feel I can do my job. Some conversations here are being said about Algeria, surveillance drones in the Mali airspace a year ago. There you go. That's their thoughts. Wellstack is responding to Lions Champion, saying, I think we need different people taking different approaches, allows a larger audience to be sensitized to the topics. And I you know what, let me add more to that, because it might have seemed like I was taking a adversarial approach to your point. I was just saying that, everybody has the right to choose whether or not they continue to watch this stream or any of my live streams based on whether or not they like my approach or not. But really what I'm saying is, I believe that there is a time and place for everything and for everyone. It has never been my style to show my emotions in any way, happy or sad, to a major degree publicly. Anyone who knows me knows that. So, even the live stream we did about, reaching 1 million subscribers, I mentioned I was excited about it, but you didn't see me like jumping around, smiling, hands in the air, doing all of that. I just said, thanks to all of you who helped us get here, right? It was a very measured calm, because I don't get too high on the highs, I don't get too low on the lows. Obviously, that particular 1 million followers across all platforms, that means nothing in the grand scheme of things, right? Obviously. So not to compare the two things. My point is that personally impacted me. And I found out the day before, and I didn't come on the live stream and, show a ton of emotion. So I'm just saying, with respect to this particular topic, you won't find that I'll be showing a lot of emotion here. Now, do I do that in more personal circles? Yes. So I sent the link. I don't know if anybody's able to copy and paste that link to the sites. It will be a different URL eventually. Eventually, it will be on the Authentic African website. The URL will match there. We made some adjustments and some changes. So right now it's a go high level link, but you see the link there. So feel free to click that link, copy and paste it out of the comments. And it will be in the description after this video ends up becoming a regular video after the live stream. All right. So it has been quite the conversation. Some people have some thoughts. Okay. I always say to maintain professional expertise as a journalism, especially in geopolitics, you have to take a measured approach. Phone Fixer says, Joe, you don't have to explain. Some of us are warriors and others are scientists and engineers. Both are needed. Afuya says, it seems you have to sign up. Yes, to join the newsletter, yes, you do have to sign up. Name, phone number, email. Yes. So to be clear, yeah, you do have to sign up in order to. Wait, no, you need an email and password? No, you shouldn't need an email and password. No. Oh, that's for just to get in the list for now, because the subscription service is not ready as of yet. So we're just talking about the list. So hopefully this is Afuya, let us know if this is what you saw on screen. Hey now, say now. I'm just looking for, I'm trying to see if I can share my screen so you guys can see what I'm seeing on screen. I know it's going to drive everybody crazy to see how many tabs I have open, but it doesn't matter. There you have it. Tab champ. So it is what it is. But yeah, so this is what you should be seeing on the screen. This is the general newsletter that you can sign up for. And here you will get updates for when the subscription service is coming. So the link that I put in the chat will take you to here. You put your name, your phone number, your email, and then you can choose what other information you'd like to receive. And you do have to agree by checking this box that you are open to receiving marketing and promotional messages, including special offers, discounts, new product updates, and among others from Authentic African Media. I don't plan to send messages to phone numbers often, but every once in a while that may happen for, specific events. Totally up to you if you want to opt in. But yes, that is the link there. Okay, so there's some other questions, comments, and thoughts. Bed, etc., says, if more don't join and break the manipulation, control, deception, lesser slavery conditions may get worse for all. Yes. Kevin is saying, curious question. Do you view the channels Pan-African Television and Kwame Pratt Jr. and Joy News? I do look at Joy News every once in a while because they focus on Ghana news. And I think you're talking about Joy News from Ghana, right? So yes, I do every once in a while review some of their videos. I do not spend a lot of time watching a lot of other people's content. So people send me stuff a lot. But no, T3 and me, I haven't. Reach out. No, good collaboration. I'm not aware of them. So yeah, I'm not always aware of everybody who does content. So there's so many people who do content on YouTube. So I'm not always aware of different people, even people who are in our space. Sometimes it can be limited in terms of who I know, if I know of them or if I know them personally. From time to time, I don't always know everyone. So yeah, feel free to keep sending me folks that I should be looking at and reaching out to. When this becomes a video, put it in the comments below afterwards, because I can't copy and paste from here. But I would like to copy and paste and put it in the YouTube. But anybody you think that I should be collaborating with, make sure when this becomes a playback video, put it in the playback. All right. Topics have been covered. We have pretty much covered it all. We have now gone way over time. I want to thank you guys for watching. I will be live again a little bit later with Top Hill Productions, or Top Hill. Is it Top Hill Productions? Sorry, Top Hill. And so you guys can catch me in a little bit on their YouTube channel, and it'll be on this YouTube channel as well. So if you found this interesting, hit that thumbs up. If you know anybody who could use some insight into any of this, feel free to share this with them. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're notified every time a new video comes out. And we ask you to ensure, as much as you can, you share this knowledge with other people, whether you share this video or share what you know, because the first thing is acknowledgement and understanding before we can actually take any action collectively. Also, one last thing I will say is, although I believe in specific movements and I disagree with the division of these movements, I do not think that I will be making any disparaging remarks about other movements. So, I know that people have that discourse in the comments, and you're free to have that there. Let's just try to keep it respectful as much as possible, and focus on how do we advance ourselves as opposed to speaking negatively about others, right? We don't have to speak negatively about others in order to advance ourselves and to go where we want to go. And so with that, Stay focused. Stay educated. And stay curious. See you guys all on the next live stream. Bye, guys.